So it's a pleasure having you in the program, if you can hear me. So we've seen large deliveries of defensive weapons to Ukraine, financial and economic sanctions, and unprecedented alienation of President Vladimir Putin. None of it seems to have been enough so far to stop what's happening. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's going to take a lot more to stop President Putin, of course, because they've been at war a month. They haven't made as much progress as they would have liked. I don't think they can withdraw from from Ukraine without saving face. So it could well be that their strategy is to do a lot more damage to Ukrainian military facilities, to kind of send a signal to everyone that Russia is very powerful. So I don't think they can actually change their behavior. And of course, sanctions take a long time to kick in, as you've seen from your own reporter, that the Europe remains dependent on Russian gas and other energy. So it is going to take a long while before any kind of course correction can take place. So in the meantime, of course, President Biden, NATO, and the others are trying to ramp up the pressure to try to further isolate Russia. But at the moment, they are still in the phase of expanding their war operations rather than diminishing them. So I think that's the position we find ourselves in. There's a long way to go in this conflict, it appears to be.
What are your thoughts on the general approach to what's happening to the Russian economy? We see numerous companies pull out. This is, of course, affecting regular Russians the most. Do you think this was the right approach by the US and its allies?
The problem is that sanctions normally do hit the poorest the hardest. It hits ordinary people. We've seen that in many, many countries for many, many decades since sanctions became a kind of weapon of choice. They're trying to say well, they're targeting sanctions and so on, but the kind of powerful people, the oligarchs and other big companies which are being sanctioned, they can usually work around those sanctions. There's a whole part of the world, the majority of the world, which is still willing and able and wanting to trade and to do business with Russia. So those impacts are not going to be felt by the very sort of most affluent, most powerful people in that country, going to be felt by those who are far poorer. That could have an effect, if you like, on promoting the protest movements, which are quite widespread in various ways. But it also, 70% or more of the population of Russia is also supporting this effort in Ukraine. So it could strengthen those nationalistic feelings as well. So sanctions are a blunt instrument, and they're rarely very successful in what they actually try to aim to achieve.
Indeed. I mean, we're also hearing negotiators talk about they're seeing hope for an end to the crisis. Is now the time to increase sanctions, you think?
Well, I think it's inevitable that the US, NATO, EU, G7, those powers, they will increase the sanctions and intensify those sanctions as well. I think that's the logic of their position. They want Russia to know that there's a red line, that effectively they've crossed it and they're not going to kind of back down. Now, of course, they're not going to intervene militarily unless the situation escalates in terrible directions, but they are going to continue to do that. But of course, that doesn't do very much to bring the conflict to an end. And diplomacy, new powers emerging, which actually, if you like, try to bring the kind of diplomatic efforts to the fore to discuss the kind of what are the demands that Russia has? What are the security guarantees that Ukraine could live with? What could NATO do in order to not sort of, if you like, intensify the pressure on Russia itself about their security? The problem is, I think America is in a pretty strong position at the moment, and I think NATO too, not only because the military element of it, but also because I think in the longer run, the United States is now an energy independent power, and it's sending more liquefied natural gas to Europe than it ever has done before, and more than Russia. Now, in the short term, Russia still remains a major supplier, but in the longer term, Russia's position is irrevocably weakening because of US shale gas and the technological revolution that's made that possible. So I think Russia is not going to back down for quite a while, I would think, until they have perhaps suffered a lot more losses and a kind of loss of legitimacy at home for this particular war. But diplomacy, it seems to be on the back burner, and it really, I guess, if you're going to resolve the problem, you're going to have to sort of promote that a lot more.
Interesting perspective. Inderjeet Parmar at City, University of London. Appreciate your time once more. Thank you.